Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Hi,
Stacey.
thanks for being here.
Thanks for having us.
I'm Stacey Hallal. I'm the artistic director here at Curious Comedy Theater, and I'm super excited because we have a bunch of guests from all around the world. Portland is covered in snow right now, so the city is shut down. So we have 2 live guests here, and then we'll be live streaming for about the next hour, talking about improv. And Portland's super special this winter because we have all these awesome guests at all of our different theaters. I don't know if you guys know, but I'm pretty sure Portland has more improv theaters per capita than just about anywhere. We're a pretty small city. We have 8 different brick and mortar theaters.
8?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Wow.
And of which you're all guests. So I'm going to allow each of you to introduce yourselves rather than me keep talking. And we'll start with you, Joe.
Okay.
And say your name, where you're from, and what you're here for.
I'm Joe Bill. I'm from Chicago. I'm one of the original founders of Annoyance Theater. I'm the director of corporate training at IO Theater, and I tour internationally, and I'm on my yearly pilgrimage to Portland.
That's right. And Joe and I have been doing some festivals together
We
this
have.
year and have known each other 20 years. If you saw the other improv podcast with him, that's online if you're interested, and we talk for a very long time.
A very long time.
But I think there's a couple good things in there.
I think there's a couple. I'm mostly just going to shut up for this interview.
Great, Laura.
My name is Laura Doorneweerd. I'm from Amsterdam, the Netherlands. I am founder of the Ohana European Improv Project, one of the founders, and artistic leader of TVA Improv in Amsterdam. And I travel and I perform for improv inside of the Netherlands and in Europe and North America. And now I'm here for a month. I'm an artist in residence with Siren Theater. And I'm almost done.
Yeah.
I'm almost leaving again. Yeah.
What have you been focusing on over there?
I teach courses in love scenes, moving, variety in improv, and long form.
Great. And now I met you about a year and a half ago,
Yeah.
almost 2 years ago at Improvaganza in Edmonton. That's where we first met. It feels like you have been traveling ever since that day.
Yeah.
Is that true?
I think my cats would agree. Yes. I do that a lot. I'm also aware that I can travel a lot because I live in a hub in Europe. So it's just easy for me to go for a few days to Madrid and teach and perform and come back, teach my weekly classes in Amsterdam and then travel again. I've done now 2 North America tours where I went from Canada to America. And did a few cities there, and that's like 2 or 3 months that I travel in summer.
That's great. And you were here in the summer, which
Yes.
was fun. We got to spend some time together. So thanks for doing this.
Oh, yeah.
All right, Jason, you're up.
Hello, my name is Jason Geary. I am from Melbourne, Australia. I've been artistic director of Improv Melbourne there. I've been improvising in Melbourne for a very, very long time. I'm a touring teacher and artist as well. I'm here in Portland for Deep End Theatre, and I'm directing a form there called Fat City, which opens this Friday night. So we've kind of hit the ground running straight into rehearsals for that. I'm also teaching a masterclass there as well, and generally kind of just working with the ensemble and performing shows around there as well. So it's been really nice. Again, I'm used to kind of touring and being in towns for a week at a time. So this artist in residency was a really great opportunity to kind of settle in somewhere and really get a feel for the company and work with what is a great company for genre and stuff like that. So I'm very excited to be working with them and chewing on something like Fat City.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. And you and I have known each other less than 24 hours.
I know, but it's one of these things where physically we've known each other for less than 24 hours, but we've been moving in circles and Venn diagrams. It's just the physical part that hasn't crossed over.
Yeah, it definitely felt like, playing with you. We got to play last night at the Deep End all together, and it's so nice that everybody's doing these residencies and we're getting to, it's like a winter festival here that's a month long,
Yeah.
which is super special. I really enjoyed playing with you last night.
Thank you, me
And
too.
excited to learn more about you in person. And so one of the things that we were just talking about are things that are exciting us right now as touring teachers and performers. And themes, I don't know if you agree, but I find that as I travel around, the same things keep coming up in cities, and it's not the same thing forever, but the same things at the same time start cropping up. So what are the themes? I'll start with you, Laura. What are some of the themes and things that are exciting you about what's happening in improv right now?
Yeah, one theme I'm very excited about currently is I suppose like women in improv and all kinds of minorities in improv, but because I'm a woman myself, that's the part I get most connected to. I find it really interesting to see what happens if you create more safety or more space for women to show what they got. It seems that improv is a little male dominated, and then that's also the style it becomes. And then women can feel less like they're part of that. But when you do, invite them more in and give them more of an environment where they can thrive, then there so much happens. So I'm currently very excited about that. I'm in an all-female, I started an all-female improv group. I did some weekend intensives with just women. I'm just in general very interested and curious about strong female improvisers. So whenever I'm in class, I try to, because actually it empowers the men to also show different types of their improv. So
That's great. We had a magical experience at Stumptown this year. And by the way, if you have questions for any of our panelists here, feel free to write them in the comments and we'll go to those. But at Stumptown, which is Portland's improv festival, a group couldn't make it, and we did an all-female set here, and then the space at the festival was filled with one of the most magical shows I've ever seen. With a bunch of women from all different cities playing together. It was so beautiful and special.
I think so. What happened? It was a great show. Because when we came out, like the audience was like, they were cheering and on their chairs, and they were like, we hadn't done a thing, and we're already standing there. But the audience was so excited to see us. So I remember standing there like this. It almost doesn't matter what we're gonna do now. This will be great. Like the interaction with the audience was so great and then we played a great show.
And had that group been able to make it to the festival, unknowingly, it would have been an all-male lineup that night.
Yeah.
So it was like a nice, and I feel like there's a turning of the guard happening in improv in general. We have a lot of 30-year-old theaters in that are experiencing a lot of cultural shift where it's no longer gradual. There's like this seismic shift that's happening, and older theaters are either going to have to change and evolve or kind of step aside, and then there's a lot of theaters.
What do you mean by older theaters?
Like, well, here it's about 30 years.
Right.
Yeah, and I feel like if they haven't evolved with time, that they're starting to have some cultural battles internally
So when you
around
say
women and people of color and ways of speaking and inclusivity and
it's kind of stepping out of the safety zone of this is how we've always done it, and this is what keeps the doors open, and this is what we're known for, and this is what it always is. And then embedded in that is just a lack of opportunity for other voices to be heard.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think it's easier for the newer theaters, like the less than 10 years old, like this has all been starting even before we noticed that it was starting. And I think it's, for me personally, like in touring, my thing is I love doing duos. And I've just found myself in the last 2 years just more interested in duoing with women or people that aren't other straight white guys. And I love my other straight white guy partners, but it's for me to be like a 55-year-old straight white guy and to take on this idea of like, oh, I can perform with a woman and then listen differently than the institutionalized way that I've learned to listen and respond differently, and put into play, you know, I think every podcast I cite Jill Bernard, who taught me 10 years ago, half of our job in improv is to lose beautifully. And when I first heard that, it was like very male, like, what do you mean lose? I can't lose, who's losing? But then I realized I'm in this 6'5" or 199 centimeters for not on the American system body, and like I am the embodiment of like establishment old white guy. And so how can I, when I tour, especially in America, behave and listen and respond to women or minorities or, you know, people whose voices are othered in the States in a different way? Even if I can just be an example for somebody, you know, in Nebraska or the center of the country, who wouldn't imagine a straight old white guy responding that way? It's like there's so many different avenues to this change happening that it's like I feel like I found my one little way, and I'm obsessively into doing that. And I think even in just playing with you these last 2 months, we found this spark that we've always had, but it's like informed by all the experience that we've had, and just the intensity of playing with you it's awesome.
I was talking with somebody, oh, sorry.
That's right. I was just going to say that I feel quite lucky in the sense that in Australia, we're so far away from establishment that we kind of had to invent a lot of it ourselves. And Improv Melbourne really found its feet when the wonderful Paddy Stiles came over to live in Melbourne. And so I kind of grew up without knowing it, or came up, I guess, in this bubble of wonderfully empowered women in the cast who, and the company who, there were no kind of gender politics in that manner, you know, and always feeling challenged, empowered, kept accountable for myself in my own actions and within the company that I was in. So once I started traveling and finding that wasn't the norm for other companies, I found myself inadvertently kind of becoming a voice for that as well. But I think that, one, I had very strong examples coming up through that, but two, Australia's so far away, we kind of had to invent it ourselves. And what I love about Australian stuff is a lot of European influence comes in from that direction, and also a lot of American influence comes in. So it forms this kind of confluence of two ideas and different styles. I mean, it's all improv, but there's no kind of rigid, I find in Australia, there's no kind of rigid, we do it this way or that way. Interestingly, probably the last 5 years, maybe there's been a little bit more of that creeping over, but generally it's just been kind of take what works. We've been so far away and we are so isolated that it just kind of takes its own shape and form. And so when we come back out into the world, it was quite a shock to come into companies and go, oh, hang on, what you do it this way, you know? It was only then that I realized how good I had it. With such amazing, strong influences for a young, improvising young man to come up with. You know?
Well, and to have a female in that directorial position is so unusual here, or used to be. So everybody in Chicago, there are women in the production side. Even, you know, I come from the world of animation and film, like women populate the production side, but the creative side, and advertising as well. 3% creative directors are female in the advertising field.
Wow.
So all the areas that I've worked have been like females produce, males get to be, you know, go to the baseball game and say they're ideating. And, and when I left Chicago, I had, you know, done the directing program at Second City, and they said, we'll never hire a woman to direct the main stage. Because every cast needs an alpha male, and an alpha male will never listen to a female director. And now, you know, now this younger generation, you know, Curious is female run, Siren is female run, Deep End is female run, Huge has Jill Bernard's influence, Denise Jones at Vancouver Theatre Sports, you know, the age of women as leaders, creative leaders, I think, is making a huge difference. You, here next to me. You know, and I think for us, we've talked a lot about gender. Obviously, we don't have a lot of representation of people of color on this panel right at this moment, which is important to mention. And it's something that, you know, as Carla Kakowski is our new co-artistic director, has moved into that position, it's a priority for us this year to try to unlock that. And there's some cities who are doing it well. Huge has had a lot of success. Improv Boston's had a lot of success in being more inclusive and welcoming. And all the festivals we've been to recently, I've seen more people of color. And you know, getting people of color on the stage is super important because people want to see themselves doing a thing. Like, I never moved to LA because I was like, I don't see myself on television. I'm a 5'3" Italian Arab shaped, you know, woman. Like, there isn't anybody that looks like me. So why would I go there? Because it doesn't feel welcoming. It doesn't feel open. So trying to do that work. So it's exciting. We spent a long time at the Vancouver tournament talking about inclusivity. So it seems like a theme globally, which is super nice. But I also feel artistically there's a shift as well. So when I started, I came from a film background, not a theater background, and I wanted to do films that were improvised, like Mike Leigh movies and Christopher Guest movies. I didn't know long form improv even existed. So I started taking short form improv classes, and then the Brody Theater, which is another theater in town, had an improv festival where I saw long form, and I was like, oh, this is it. You know, a bunch of people telling a story together. And so I went from only one class in short form to long form. But at the time, 20 years ago, it was rare for someone to start with long form, at least here in the States. Everyone started at short form and then kind of wanted to move on. Now, there's tons of people doing long form first, and that's a younger generation wants to do more of that. They understand it. Audiences are getting to understand it. But people tend to get hung up on format. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, you know, long form themes and how you see those evolving in your experiences. Do you want to start?
Yeah, and this is kind of the masterclass that I'm running here at Deep End. I'm doing, it's not necessarily a format creation thing, but what I was seeing a lot of, particularly with groups trying to improvise or coming together going, all right, we need to do a thing, is all of their energy would go into discussing the format, the function, the mechanics of what they were doing and trying to nail that. And then they wouldn't leave themselves any room to create. So essentially they would build cages around themselves and fill that in, but they'd create the vessel before they knew what they really wanted to capture in it. And so what I'm trying to do and encourage people to do is have those conversations and actually find out what it is that you want to capture, and then build the structure that's suitable around that to leave yourself enough room to improvise off the top of that. So you're not creating a form and an elaborate format. What you're doing is you're creating a solid base built on passion, built on ideas, built on inspiration, and then enough structure to allow you to play off the top of that rather than just hit your marks, do this. So there's the freedom in improvisation. So you're free falling, not just climbing through the monkey bars. Is that a thing here?
Yes, you know, nailed it.
Yes, monkey bars. Yeah, not just kind of weaving your way through the checkpoints and going, all right, well, we did that, we came up with this, we did that, so we're doing it well. So yeah, I've found that a lot of energy goes into getting something, building something first that you can get right, then trying really hard to get that right, and the backslapping comes when you get, oh yeah, we got it right, rather than honouring, this is an art form, we're artists, so let's be inspired, let's take inspiration from genre, from you know, anywhere. That's the thing. I mean, you listen to a song, you get a feeling, you know, you look at a painting, you get a feeling. Why can't we try to capture those feelings or let those you know, ricochet off each other till we get to somewhere where we want. And so my masterclass at the moment, the first part is talking about these things that are passionate about. They might be political views, they might be genres, they might be something that you're driven by. And the second part of the masterclass is starting to talk about form. But I get my students to talk about forms or parts of improv that they don't like. We've all got those things where we put games away where we go, oh, I don't like doing that. I don't want to do that. Or I've seen it done a million times and I hate it. And as you start getting on as improvisers, that pile gets bigger and bigger as you kind of ignore it. It's just, you look over here, it's this mountainous thing. And there's got to be some merit there. There's got to be some merit in this stuff. So what I try to do, same way as trying to crack open inspiration and find out what it is in there, take some of these things that I've written off or that you, the artist, has written off, and crack it open and go, well, what's the merit in there? What's the one or two things, even if I don't use this form, but what was there to make it fly in the first place? Because maybe I just did it wrong, maybe I was taught it wrong, maybe I've seen it done poorly or in a way that didn't inspire me.
Or it's a weakness. Like I find a lot of people put on that shelf things that they can't do well.
Yeah.
And rather than push through and find out why they're struggling, they're like, I just hate that. I even had somebody one time with a group trying to devise a form with them. I go asking what they like and don't like, and I was like, do you want to do something more narrative? So I hate narrative. And I was like, okay. What do you like? I'm like, well, I like the form the movie or the Herald. I was like, those are both narrative.
Yeah.
So what, I don't know if it was genre narrative they particularly didn't like or feeling trapped, but there's something deeper that makes us react that way. Do you find that people are often dismissing the thing that challenges them?
Yeah, that's one of the reasons for the things that are there. And truth be told, probably a good third of my pile is that as well. But yeah, you've got to ask why. It's those why questions. And not a lot of improvisers do. They'll either dismiss it and say, I'll put it over here. They don't dig down and go, why do I hate this? What is it? What buttons is it pushing in me? And take that time. So over a 4-week masterclass, the first class is spent on inspiration. Our next class is going to be spent on trying to break open all these things that we've kind of put away. And the reason why I do it this way is the two favourite formats that I've created that are played all around the place by other people. And there's a huge pile of other formats that have not succeeded as well. Right. But the ones that are really seem to take off and be inspire other people to play them as well have come from this process. It's a process of inspiration and a process of trying to break open things that I don't like. Like Fat City, I wasn't a huge fan of a La Ronde because I never saw it done well, and I'd see it be done okay, but then I'd also see just improvisers being clever and trying to link everything and not just playing moments and scenes and letting the La Ronde itself tell the story rather than the improviser's wittiness kind of tell the story.
Right.
So that was one of the things that I'd shelved away. And when I started thinking about Fat City, I was inspired by Elmore Leonard, inspired by James Ellroy, inspired by Frank Miller, this kind of literary crime fiction that is a little bit kind of, gutter crime, so like street hood crime. Then I thought, okay, I don't want to just do a crime show. Like I want to have a form that is interesting to me. So then I started looking at forms to use that, and the La Ronde was a perfect way to design a cast that you can use. So in the first act, we do the La Ronde, and then we break open the La Ronde so it's a straight line, and wherever we decide the most interesting character in that La Ronde is, that becomes our protagonist for the second half. Then we play a long form, and we've got a cast design then. So those, taking a mechanic that I ignored actually broke something open for me. And if I hadn't have gone, all right, I'm going to dig through this stuff, then it would never have kind of clicked together. So I think there's merit in looking back at that stuff, and there are going to be times where it hits and where it misses. But you've got to at least take the time to do it, and that's what I'm trying to get people to kind of focus on at the moment.
Yeah. There's a lot of judging of formats instead of seeing how else they could be done differently or what. I feel like every short form game is a tool to teach a skill you can use in long form, and every long form format is working some muscle. Yeah. You've been excited about thinking about format. You want to share some of those thoughts?
Yeah. I think what as a teacher, I try to look at like, oh, what kind of scene can I put you in to show either what we've been working on or what you're good at, and then taking that to formats like, oh, so I've developed formats often based on this particular group. So I remember directing the Edmonton Ensemble 1.5 years ago, and there I felt like, oh, they have different editing speeds. So one of them will go like, oh, that's a 10-second scene, great, and others were like, oh, let's give it a minute or two. And like, oh, that means that the person with like the 10-second arc will always be first. So it's like, oh, that means that person will often always also be in the scenes. And like, I kind of like to change that up. I'd like to have it also be more fair, that we see everyone, because it's nice to have the feeling of, oh, I've seen all the players of this cast now in different scenes. So to just basically go from a more facilitating point of view, like, oh, how can I facilitate that I see all the players a minimum number of time? And from there, it became a format where there will always be two-person scenes, but other two people would be ghosts in the scenes. And what was very nice about that is that I really like physicality and love scenes and stuff, is that I would let them touch and move. But that also means that the players themselves did not think about how they would move, or they would get a push or a touch, and it got them out of their head into their body. And it was again to facilitate, because they were so smart and witty, that I could see them solve it with with words and with jokes. I'm like, it's great that you can do it, but I want to see if I can make you do something else. So I really like building formats around those ideas. Like, can I make you do something that you otherwise wouldn't do, or that I think you will be good at? And like Jason was saying as well, like to be inspired by genres, by theater, by songs, by that is where I get very excited about, because I'm more a theater person than I'm a comedy person. So to take theater inspiration, I sometimes feel very blessed that I didn't have proper theater education. So my first time teaching was at the age of 19 with a group of 12 kids. And the theater school I was part of said do whatever. And so I basically looked at them, and I was not being hindered by any education, and just looked at like, oh, how are they responding? What's working well? When do I see their face light up, and when am I losing them? And I feel like that has been helping me a little bit also with formats. Like, can I put you in something that suddenly I see this happening, and I'm like, okay, now I'm on to something. And this is not, it's coming out from my brain, it's coming from me looking at them. And then just, it's also improvising as a teacher or improvising as a format creator. Like, how about you do this? And then you get this pile of failed, like that didn't work. No, it didn't. All right, let's do something else.
Again, it's building the form around what's there, rather than having a form and trying to stuff things inside.
Oh, totally.
And sometimes the things that you either fail at, or that pile over here, it's kind of a scrap heap, like a junkyard. So if however you're developing your format, then if there's something missing, you can look over in the shit pile and go, oh, maybe this is a hot spot thing. You plug stuff in. And I think very much like the two of you, the two formats I tend to teach the most are the bat and the scramble. And the bat was one that started in the late 90s, and it was, this idea that there's a certain way that Georgia Pacific did the bat, and a certain process that led us to the bat, and those people did the bat, and that was the bat. And then about, within 2 years, all of a sudden, people heard about this idea, and they're just turning off the lights, and then people improvise with the lights off, and then they call it the bat. Right. And so then that was annoying to me for about 2 years, until I realized, it doesn't matter. And then it's the semantics. Your ego takes that hit, where it's like, well, no, that's not the bat. And then somebody said, well, it's a bat. I'm like, oh, okay, hold on. Is it a bat? Okay. And as the bat's more than 20 years old, and there's short form groups that do it, and they turn off the lights and they just do bits, and it's comedy and chasing jokes and whatever. But even for me, as I've taught it, I have a rehearsal treatment of that I send out, and I said, here's a starting point. Here's where we started. There's stuff that I really love in here, but you might want to do something else. I just sent Tim Orr in San Francisco a copy of this because he wants to do it, and I've realized like letting go of, you know, the bat almost became this institution in my mind, and I just let it go. It's like, oh, like improv formats are just here. This is how we did it. What would be fun for you? And then the scramble is one of those things that it was always an evolutionary process and different from cast to cast. And there's so many formats now that exist. And JTS Brown is the one that comes to mind, where JTS Brown was a format that was done by a specific group of people and never really found out exactly what it was for 2 years. And the devices, the transitions, the moves, the style of play was all based on those people and how they play. And in my last years of teaching at IO, they'd say, I want to teach us to do a JTS Brown. I would say, no.
Yeah,
Because
that's what we were just dealing with too. Right? We were like, oh, we were all interested in JTS Brown. I started doing research into it, and they didn't even do a show for 6 months because they were devising the format. And it feels like it should almost be a process rather than a format. Yeah. What they did is they sequestered themselves and played together committedly, you know, every week or more than once a week, and developed a language and edits and permissions to make certain types of moves that they recognize, and they develop their own culture and language. And it's interesting to me once I started reading about it, like, oh, we've all agreed that there's a sweep edit, a tag out edit, you know, the walk on edit. But what about the edit that's repeating a line from earlier that then leads to a repeat of the scene that veers off? What about this other? We've sort of agreed, like, this is as many edits as we want to know and that we all agree on. But they were just creating new moves and new internal language.
And I think it might be like they were discovering through the repetition, continuing to revisit what was fun for them.
Yeah.
It's a fun, they're discovering what the format is through having fun with themselves. And you know, certain moves really suit certain people. And it's, you know, I love this idea. I've fallen in love the last few years with this idea of harmony over unity. Because like I think this unity, let's all be on the same page and we're all going to do the same thing. And I think all of us have said versions of, you know, we have a set idea, we have the knowledge that we have, but every process is organic. And for me, and I'll start, when I do the scramble is just, I have a suitcase, a metaphorical suitcase full of stuff that I know. And I know 5 different ways a show could open. But for me, it's like, it always starts at a festival. You have people with different language. I taught a scramble and directed a scramble in Finland. And there's a cast of 12 and there's 6 different native languages in this cast. So immediately in my head, it's like, okay, how do we use 6 different native languages? And then the same as you two, what do you like, what don't you like? You know, and there's 2 people, I hate musical improv, and 2 people, I love musical improv. So in my mind, in the nature of harmony, it's like, okay, so there'll be some singing, there'll be some not singing. And the person that has the 10-second edit span, okay, that person is going to do that. How can I take into account in this structure that's already here that we just haven't identified a way to give that person freedom to do their thing, but also within the structure of the format, invite them out of the space where other singers can sing, dancers can dance. And then for me, the puzzle working of like, how do you get to do something where everybody has a good time and we're celebrating all of the individual pieces in harmony to form something greater? Like, that's the thing that drives me. And then you slap you know, what's this called? It's a scramble. That's just having the title The Scramble makes it okay for festival producers or anybody go, oh, well, we're gonna do the scramble, as opposed to having to come up with a new, you know.
Yeah, I actually had, so I directed the format again a few times, including last Improv Amsterdam, and then we had an evaluation of the festival, and one of the things I said was actually the fact that the show, it was pretty magical. It was a really great show. They did amazing. Like, if I would do the format rehearsal again and I would have half the time, I would not spend, because I did half the rehearsal on workshopping and getting to know each other, and the other half about the format, I would totally focus on the getting to know each other, getting comfortable with each other, the warming up to each other, and then I would send them an email with the format.
Yeah.
And that's what I feel like with Curious. So when we first started, when we first started, Portland only had 2 other improv theaters, and one was Comedy Sports, which had its set format, and one was the Brody, and it was a very small community still at the time. It's much bigger now. And so we had to build our own community of curious improvisers. And the early stage was just this family that did everything together. And so we would do a sketch show together. Then we would do the Neutrino Project, which was an improvised movie together. And then we would do Fit to Print, which is like the old living newspaper at Second City together. And then it became that panic of like, what's the format? Like, didn't matter. It was just Stacey's coming in and telling us what we're gonna do, and we're gonna figure it out together and evolve as we do it. And I would start to pick things that I thought were, no one's playing characters. Let's maybe do more of a Laurent.
Yeah, yep.
Or our listening's not that great. Let's do this or that. And I would pick formats that would actually exercise whatever muscle I felt I was starting to see weakness in. But the format wasn't the thing. The ensemble was the thing. And then it was like, what do we play today? What board game are we gonna pick off the shelf? Are we playing Monopoly today? Are we playing, and people aren't like, oh my God, Monopoly. I can't remember the rules.
Can you imagine getting invited to someone's house for board games and they just roll out blank paper in front of you and a whole bunch of pens and say, all right, we're going to think of this game right now. It's got to be the best game and it has to sell 1 million copies. Everyone's going to be like this. Some people might jump in and start scrawling. I guess if that happened with improvisers, it would be different.
I was going to say, it sounds like the best night of board games of my life.
But generally, people would have that kind of, everyone would be up on their heels, you know, like going, oh. But I think if you work to have the connection with the people, then it doesn't matter what the structure is.
Yeah, and Laura just inspired me, just this idea of like going to a festival and now you have half the rehearsal time. And if you spend all that time just playing with each other and doing stuff, there is something in improvisers where if you send them an email and say, here's our format, probably that we'll be doing tonight, and then that group of people that played together for 3 hours shows up, there's something in improvisers that will go, yeah, okay, let's see. Let's see what this is. Yeah. And then if you give them this is the suggestion, I think this is how it's gonna go, and then kind of one note, why don't we start this way and see what happens? I think there's something in the improvisers' need to take on the impossible, but also to work a living puzzle with other people that they're already in harmony with, I almost want to try that. It's like, we're just gonna play and love each other for 3 hours, and then I'll send you the format before the show.
Yeah. Yes.
I love that idea.
Yes. I think that was part of the magic. I mean, there was the all women's aspect to that show, but I think part of it was we don't have time to rehearse, we don't have time to think of a format. A couple people were like, I like this, I like that, and then it just became magic, and everyone was ready for anything because nothing had been ruled out.
That's the thing. I think a lot of fear comes into improv, even with experience, with the fear of getting it right.
Yeah.
And even as an international improviser who are playing in casts together, you still go into festivals and someone, there's still that fear of like, oh, I hope I don't fuck this up, I don't get it right, rather than attacking the stage with that freedom. There's still that kind of voice in the back of your head sometimes where you're like, what if I don't get this right? And then what that happens, particularly with more inexperienced improvisers, of course, if they worry about getting it right so much and then they fuck it up, it's that puts everything on tilt and they start chasing the right rather than just going where the wrong is taken.
Yeah, and I think it activates, like in the younger improviser mind, the need to prove stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think like a critical differentiator between early and intermediate versus advanced improvisers is like we are ruthlessly in service to whoever we're on stage with. And it's like, I don't have to prove shit. All I have to do is, I don't know what this is either, but I'm gonna serve you, and like, I'll throw something out or I'll listen, but I'm here with you, and whatever is in this moment, this moment. When you get improvisers, and they're everywhere, who are of that mindset to be in service to each other, I mean, I hate to say it will never fail.
But mostly won't.
It mostly won't.
And it's the same thing with unconscious incompetence, right? So beginners too, it's like, oh, we've never played together. We don't know each other's weaknesses. We're just gonna jump in and everything's great. And there is no, oh, I do this. I'm always the 10-second person. So now I have to think about not being the 10th, right? It's just, I get to be who I am because we've never played together before. But it's when that intermediate level of conscious incompetence, where it's not just I'm going to try to chase the right, but I'm going to correct other people too. It's like, oh, I'm going to fix it. I'm going to save it. I'm going to help it. You know, I'm going to get it back on track.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I love the game copy paste as a warm up, because you know, if somebody does a movement and the next person evolves it and then the next person brings it back to that first one, right? They're trying to correct it. If I said spaghetti and then the next person says Piscetti and the third person says spaghetti again, they've destroyed the game, but they've corrected the mistake. You know, it's just repeating things and letting them evolve and letting them grow. And
I don't know the game copy paste.
it's, you know, you're around a circle. It's a sound in motion, but across a circle. So say I came to you and I was like, spaghetti. Then you would go spaghetti. And then Laura says, Piscetti. And then somebody says spaghetti. There's always the person who's like, no, Stacey started it with spaghetti and we need to all make sure it stays spaghetti.
I got it.
Yeah. And it's like, don't correct it. Let it evolve. You get an advanced group. You're playing with my team Hood. Our warm-ups are really ridiculous to watch because we never stop one and go, what do you want to do next? We just start with one warm-up and then it evolves. And if somebody jumps in and just from copy-paste, we're into hotspot. And from that, we're sending whoosher, you know, and there's no,
You're
let's
in the
all
process.
agree what the next exercise is and where the end is. Yeah, but when somebody first comes in, they're like, oh, was this a variation on, wait, what?
Yeah.
Am I
What do you
doing
think?
copy paste wrong, right?
Yeah, and that's what I love going into, particularly traveling, when people, you go into a cast or work with a company and they're so worried about looking after you and going in the warm-up dance, they're like, do you know this guy? I'm like, just play it. I'll catch up. I'll catch up. Let's
We
just
just
do
did
this.
that last night. We're all like, great. So speaking of traveling, there is a question here for us that says, have you seen a lot of collaboration between theaters and improv communities in your travel and experience? And if so, what advice or observations do you have for the growing community here in Portland?
There are not many places like Portland where there's so many improv theaters and improv companies. So that's, I think, one. Of the places I go to, there are not many cities with multiple bigger professional theaters or groups. So I haven't seen a lot of that.
I would tend to, we in the States always point to Austin, Texas as sort of the model where there's, you know, 3, 4, 5 main theaters all doing different things and they all play at each other's theaters, they all go to each other's shows, they all drink together. And it's that sort of hippie state of Austin. And in a way, it's almost like Oz, like how can this possibly exist? But that's the, you know, that's the one that they really understand that everybody being able to be who they are and then also playing and supporting each other serves the greater mission, which is build an improv community so that that improv is so in that community that people in business offices are saying just the word improv or impro every day. Just that people say that word is everything towards the greater good.
I think in Australia, we were a small pool of improvisers for us. For a long time, there was one company in each city. Probably the last 5 or 6 years, other companies have sprung up. And for a little while, it was very kind of fenced off, you know, like this is our stuff, this is our, and while I was AD of Improv Melbourne, I was very conscious of trying to reconcile the fact that Improv Melbourne used to be the pillar, the one thing that was in Melbourne, and now it's part of a community, so trying to find its way in. What I find generally is that there's always a percentage of the company who want the fence and the walls up to work like this, and there's other people who are willing to be more part of the general community. And I've always encouraged that. I think we can build community, we can build great shows. So while I was at Improv Melbourne, I started some co-productions, some sketch shows, things like that actually worked officially with other companies. But now more and more in Melbourne, I'm seeing people who are part of different companies. So they might be an ensemble member or a member of 2 or 3 of the companies in town. and make that work. So that's really refreshing to see, because for a long time I feel like there were very standoffish people, and I think there still are, but hopefully they're going to be fighting a losing battle.
Yeah, like I think there'll always be those people, but and where Portland's concerned, like even last night, it's just a show, but there's 3 of us that are all in, and we've all known each other from touring all over the world, and we find ourselves in Portland, and we're working at 3 different Portland theaters, and it's snowing, and everything in the city of Portland is canceled. Everything is shut down. But D'Amica's got us over at the deep end. Nope, we're going. And we're all like, oh, it's snowing. And what are we doing? Let's go. Yeah. And so we show up, and here we are in Portland, people from all these different theaters, all playing together. The house is packed because we're doing our one little piece to do what we do on this night and always. And that's, to me, more important than the people. There will always be people who will be afraid, and there'll always be people who will have that that ruthless attachment to the group that they're part of, and they just will desperately hold on to it.
And we're not competing with each other. We're
Yeah.
competing with other things you can do with a Friday night.
Right.
We're competing other things you can do with your money. So we have, television is a much bigger competitor to whatever we're doing than the other improv group.
Yeah, I like to do the math. Like, we have 170 seats max, which is huge for, and most of those other theaters average 30, 40, 70 at the most. So even with 9 of them, we're still, 500,
Total seats.
We need 500 people in Portland to come see improv to sell out every theater in town. It's not that many in a city of this size. I do think it's, I recognize, as somebody who put my house money into building a theater, that, it's hard to pull yourself out of the poverty mentality, which makes you feel afraid. It makes you feel competitive. It makes you feel like when somebody is inspired by something you did or happen to have the same idea at the same time, feel like you're just treading water and somebody's pulling your leg and you're starting to take water in. Like, it's super hard. And at the same time, we're improvisers, all these tools should be applied to ourselves. And I told my therapist, and she's like a practicing Zen Buddhist, and she's like, Zen Buddhists don't get along with each other. I was like, improvisers have, performers have way more ego to deal with. But I think it's less, there's some ego and narcissism or whatever, but I think it tends to be more like just panic and the, survival instinct that generates that. But I feel like we're getting more and more open here in Portland, and playing with you guys last night at Deep End is great, and having you guys here right now is great. So it's a great question. Here's a question. What has been your biggest challenge to performing internationally?
I mean, the challenge that well, here's the thing. So I started improvising in French about 6 years ago, and it's terrifying. And I am completely in ownership that I suck and I have no business improvising in French. But I also I'm addicted to the fact that I'm an improviser and have been for a long time. And so when I look at something that's a challenge, I look at it as there's a place I can go where I'm not comfortable, and I'm already doing this, and I'm gonna die doing this, so it's my duty to go into the discomfort. And so the challenge is literally walking on stage in France and being mindful that I have to let go of my translator, I have to let go of my anger at not being able to remember a French word that I've known for 25 years, and I just have to be present with somebody else who happens to speak a different language, but we're both improvisers and we'll figure it out. So the challenge for me is I'm so comfortable performing in English, but then seeing that part of me that is just like any other improviser who will shit his pants if he doesn't have control. And that's my international challenge.
Yeah, we were talking about that the other day, because my native tongue is Dutch, and then I started improvising in English, and that was scary and out of my comfort zone, and then it became my comfort zone again. And it's like, oh shit. And now I need to, where is the next one? And then next, language-wise would be German. So we had some fun sharing our terrible mistakes in our second or third language. Of course it's a challenge. It's a beautiful, amazing challenge where also your fellow players can rise up to the occasion and make you look good. I think, so challenges, real, like, and not they're fun, those are fun challenges, and sometimes they're the challenges where you're, where I'm at shows or in ensembles where I get a lot of rules that everyone gets except for me. So then we go back to can I let go of not getting the rules or knowing the rules or not knowing the genre. I played in a Tennessee Williams where all the North American improvisers knew exactly what the style was about, and I had no clue. But again, there is this beautiful challenge of can I allow myself to sort of surrender to my fellow players, to the art of improv, that it will all be fine. Oh, and I once stepped into a Polish scene. It was a Polish-speaking scene, and I stepped into it because they needed, and I could see it, they needed another player. They needed a woman so that the main character could cheat with another woman. And so I played that, and then they started talking to me, and I remembered one word in Polish, and that was tak, and that's yes.
Perfect word to
Right?
remember.
It's a good word to know in any language. Just ask the word for yes. And then at a certain point, I realized I forgot the word for no. I just didn't know. And then I can see during the play that my fellow players are recognizing, she's never going to say no. So they were just like, they let me confess to everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was really nice. Yeah.
Cool. How about you?
My challenge, much the same. I enjoy finding different ways to connect because I do not have a second language. It was not something that was a focus in Australia, and so I. Teaching and working with other languages. At first I was very, very anxious about, but then realizing that once I started watching scenes and watching students play, that I didn't even need a translator. You know, that I could just tell from the body, from the energy, from the tension, from what was happening, that the words were the last thing I needed to be able to teach there. And so that's been a joy and a challenge to get confident in that as well. And the other thing is just Australia's very fucking far away from places.
Yeah.
And so that has been a challenge in itself. One, maintaining relationships and networking, and the good thing about improvisation and our communities are that we do kind of ricochet off each other. And so once you start getting out there and start doing a few different festivals, be it in Europe or the US, then, you know, kind of word gets around, or allies get around, or you cross paths with people again. But to kind of manage that from Australia is actually quite difficult because we're 30 hours from Europe, you know, we're 24 hours from here. And so just to kind of have the time and keep that, and of course, internet helps all that sort of stuff now, but just the physical challenge of the whole thing, and maintaining a life at home, but also getting out and touring. So that is part of the challenge, I think. And for me, while I enjoy keeping the relationships alive, it's the most challenging part because it's essentially just logistics. It gets me to the point where I can be in a room and connected, you know. But I find there's longer times between that connection that feeds my soul as an international teacher than perhaps other people who can travel more kind of easily around either the US or Europe.
Can I ask Jason a follow-up question?
Yes,
It
Joe.
seems like all, and I've been to your country a couple times,
Yeah.
and there's people I love like you. But it seems like all of you that tour and all of you that have been doing this a while, you all have that same thought that we're so fucking far away from everybody.
Yeah.
Every single one of you. And so my curiosity is like, how does that affect you when you're playing together at home? Or does it?
I don't think it does. I mean, I'm no more comfortable at home than I am anywhere else. I guess maybe subconsciously, it's more like we've got to energize each other a bit more. We've got to make sure that we're checking in on each other, particularly the touring kind of teachers, when we're together, to make sure that we keep ourselves engaged. And I think that happens a lot. I think it could happen more. Again, Australia's a big country as well.
Yeah.
So it's not easy to get. It's like seven major cities in the space of Europe, and so it is we're quite separated there as well. But I think playing at home, when we manage to play together, it's really great. But we've all got things pulling us in different directions, and so say Paddy Styles, for example, or something like that. I love Paddy, and we're great friends. But the last time I played with Paddy in Melbourne was maybe a year ago.
Wow.
And we're either there or ships in the night, and I've seen it at other places, but it's kind of the blessing and the curse is we're constantly kind of going out across the seas and looking at Facebook and cursing like, where are you now? No, I want to be there too. But yeah, so I think we put a bit more energy in, and I think perhaps the touring teachers or that kind of level of player in Australia feels that responsibility to re-engage a little bit there as well. So it's challenging like that, but it's I just wish we had Futurama tubes that we could just go bonk and away we go.
Yeah, I mean, even, domestically, it was because I went to Atlanta 7 times in a year for my marketing job, when I still had that job, that I built that relationship with Dad's Garage. And the first 5 years we were open, we did no short form here, and I didn't want to do short form here. And then they invited us to their tournament, even though we didn't do short form. So we went out there and we performed very badly in the short form games. And I was very embarrassed. But then the last show, we were like, let's, and this is just bringing together both exposing yourself to uncomfortable things and also letting go of format. The last show, we were like, let's each do 3 games. So let's do it like a Harold. We'll do 3 beats of the same scene. So whatever challenge they give us, we'll incorporate into that scene, but we'll do 3 beats. And afterwards, everyone's like, that was so amazing. Nobody's ever done anything like that. And we were like, we were just doing the only thing we got. Just to try to feel good again. And so it both pushed us to do short form, which we hadn't done, and now it's actually influenced our entire theater. That's now our flagship show, is have short form. But also it made us bring something to a tournament that all the people who are comfortable with short form might not have ever thought to have done. So it's so nice to cross. I mean, I come from an exchange student life. My sister went to Japan in high school. My other sister went to Germany. I went to Turkey. And then my mom taught at my high school and started doing exchange programs with Japan, Turkey, Venezuela, Germany. We constantly had people, which is why I love having people in my house and keep trying to convince you guys to live with me. So one last question for each of you, and then we'll wrap it up. And this is a question from the live stream, which is, what was a groundbreaking performance moment for you in improv? And if this is 2 questions, and if you could impart just one piece of wisdom from your own experience, what would it be? It's a big question.
So the first one that comes to mind, because I'm fortunate enough to have had a lot of groundbreaking moments or instances, but it's because Jason's here. We're both fans of Tom Waits, and we were at the festival in Canberra, and and Jason's one of the 2 or 3 Aussies that usually once or twice a month or every 2 months we're in contact. But it was like coming up to Canberra, we need to do this Tom Waits thing. Yeah, we need to do this Tom Waits thing. And then, and we didn't know what it was, but we're just like, yep, we're doing it. We submitted it, and Nick said, okay, yeah, you're doing it.
We're doing it.
And we don't know. And it's just basically we both love Tom Waits. And then like a month before I come, Jason's like, oh yeah, by the way, I toured a one-man Tom Waits show in Australia. Like, why didn't you tell me? and this is like, we're gonna co-direct. But it's like, but he's toured a one-man show. How dare you? What? And we got there, and I threw him. I'm like, what if we kind of like tied in Tom Waits to Del Close's idea that it's our job to enchant and horrify?
Yeah.
And Jason's like, all the characters can be either enchanted or horrific, and then they have to switch. Great. And then what people would be fun to play with in that. And we cast like the people, every single person, and then Kevin from Japan, who we didn't even know exists on piano, who loves Tom Waits. Mm-hmm. And then we met with our cast. We didn't rehearse, we met for 45 minutes. We talked about what the show could be, and then we improvised 2 or 3 songs in a green room, and then we did the show. And for me, it's, the show was dark, it was awesome, it had just enough device in it. The people that were playing it were great. I don't know if we could ever replicate it again. Mm-hmm. But almost every audience member that was in that audience was floored, they loved it, except there's one friend of ours, Beatrix from Vienna, who's kind of our age and our level. I met her outside for a cigarette, and we got all the back slaps and everything, and yeah, we did it, and Jay and I are high-fiving. And I go out to Trixie, and I said, oh, thanks for coming to the show. I did not like it so much. And for me, that's improv. That's improv.
Yeah.
And then my piece of advice is be passionate about serving others.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Oh, so many things come to mind, but sort of to continue on what he says, like the moment where you don't expect it is when it's the biggest surprise. So I applied with a duo show that me and Gail Perry from Friends came up with, but just like in this, like that would be a great type of show to do. We both love physicality and movements and edits. So we came up with it, we applied, and we didn't get in Athens, but our respective groups did. And then just before the festival started, the organization asked us like, oh, one of the opening act fell through. Could you do the duo show that we couldn't program? So we're like, sure, the one where you're like, I don't know, but your mouth already said yes, and then you have to do it. Sort of like how we applied, like with this idea that we came up with. And so we meet in the dressing room, like, I guess we're doing, what did we write? Like, so we looking up in our emails, like, right, that's what we're gonna do. And so I saw the video later, and there is something on my face when I entered the stage, like, I guess we're doing this. I'm curious too what this will be. And it was awesome and amazing, and I had such an amazing time, and I made him speak French, which I love to listen to. And it was just super fun, and the yes saying before you know if you're ready for it, the leaping, being inspired with someone from France, and then just connecting on something and going with it. It was the type of show where I'm like, I don't really care if the audience loved it or not. I had the best time, and it was really nice that it showed. And he's an amazing performer, so that was just a joy. Like, oh, I get to do this. Parting wisdom. You already said such a good thing.
I know. I took the number one answer. Yeah. I don't know.
Survey says.
I encourage people to listen, and not just in the scene, but also how was that rehearsal for you? How was that scene for you? How was that terrible show for you? Like, can we, maybe if we listen also around it, then we can learn so much more. Because it's okay if things go weird or awkward or bad, but let's talk about that. Mm-hmm. So let's keep listening.
Great, thank you.
The thing that broke ground for me was my very first time I performed overseas was in Berlin. And I had never performed overseas before, never performed in Europe before. And I was cast in a super scene show. And we were at a comedy club in Berlin. It was a couple hundred people in. It was a cold night, crammed, windows were steamed. It was amazing. And I get up on stage and I start doing great improv, like really good. And I'm ripping out zingers, and I'm like, this is fantastic. Germans, like this. And I'm like, there's a voice in my head going, what's going on? These are good. Like, and then that moment for me was, I can't predict what the audience want from me.
Right.
I just got to play here. So I can't sit out there knowing, like wondering or trying to hit them, trying to please them. And that moment for me really brought to light how much security I got from that, because I'd only been playing in Australia and I was used to the rhythm of Australian audiences and working with improvisers who were also used to that rhythm. And the improv wasn't bad, it wasn't failing, but what I thought would just knock down the back wall with laughter was just not getting it. And the interesting thing about that super scene, if anyone knows a super scene, you start with 5 and then you lose a story, see the next scene of the next ones until you get to the last 2 stories were a rock opera musical, which in super scene senses would normally go to the last thing. Then there was a desperate suicidal love triangle and the love triangle one in that show. They were all interested in this amazing dramatic end. It was so fantastic. But that moment, that light switch of like, there's that 10% of my brain that is worried about that. And that 10% needs to be here. And if we're doing this well, they'll get what they want. Which brings me to my thing that I like to say whenever I'm teaching and remind people of, and Randy Dixon first told me this, is that when we tell stories, we're not trying to tell a whole story and hit the audience over the head with it. What we're trying to do is create 3/4 of a circle, or like a U shape, and the audience need to complete that circle. And if in our show, in our 50 minutes, we can get that join there, then we've succeeded. Rather than trying to create this entire thing and hitting the audience with it. And I think that was the Berlin show was the first step on my journey to realize I don't have to get them, I have to welcome the audience up to us.
That's very nice. Great, and I'll throw one in, which is which Joe was there for. So my group, All Jane No Dick, in 2001 started to tour, and we got into a bunch of festivals, and we were the only like all women group at the time, which helped us get into a lot of festivals. And we did the Chicago Improv Festival, opened for Bass Prov, and they're like, what are these punk ass Portland girls gonna do? We're gonna go watch. And then we all fell in love. And then we got into the Del Close, early days Del Close Marathon, and we got scheduled for Saturday at 7:30. And then one of our trio dropped out. And she was the sparkly one, and we were both support players. So our scenes with her were always great, but our scenes with each other always struggled because we hadn't built that muscle yet. And we were like, what are we gonna do? And we're like, I mean, she dropped out a week before the festival, and we were like, we're just gonna do it. And we didn't rehearse, because if it had gone badly, we would like only discourage us. And so this is inspired by your stories as well. And so I have 2 words of wisdom, and one is be more afraid of not doing a thing. Be more afraid of regretting not doing it than of doing it and failing at it. And the other is something that you referred to too, is there's this great Norman Lear who created all the great American TV shows in the 70s. I think he has a tattoo and it says, this too I get to experience. And I think when you first start, it's easy to lose the joy and the fear. And you're not like, oh, I get to do this. You're like, I'm terrified, I'm scared, I'm nervous. And then when you're doing a show every night of the week, you'll be like, oh, I got a show. And you walk into like one day I was walking down the stairs. I mean, I've done a lot of shows here in the past 10 years. I was just like so tired. And then I was like, who am I to be walking to a theater to play in front of a bunch of people who took the time and paid to watch me play and be like, oh, I gotta go do a show. And I immediately just shifted it to, I get to do this. And it helped me through stage fright in the early days, and it's helped me keep my passion alive, so. It's been cool. So we've been going for a while. So any parting words?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you guys so
Thank you
much.
for
Thanks for
this.
being here, you
Thank
guys. Yay. Thanks, Luke, for live streaming. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Bye.
Bye.
Let me take a second. Thanks, guys.
Yay.
Awesome. I could talk with you
I was
guys
gonna say,
all
me too. There were more questions. I had more.